In recent years, we have become more aware of the impact that problematic cinema has had on our communities. Instead of giving films a pass for being a product of their time, we've encouraged publishers and filmmakers to take responsibility for past mistakes. It's not about canceling certain films or franchises, but instead using accountability to learn from our mistakes and pursue a better space for cinema. To be clear, I'm not talking about controversial films that bring up important social issues, but more films that are explicitly racist or sexist that have shaped the way we have thought for decades. Today, I want to talk about two of these types of films that were a big part of my film education and development and are perhaps two of the most problematic films in the history of cinema. The first is D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, which contains many characters wearing blackface and an abundant amount of harmful stereotypes of black people. The second is Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, a Nazi propaganda documentary that contains hateful speech and imagery. If you have gone to film school, you have most likely seen at least one of these films, since they are common resources. But in this age of recognizing the negative impact of films like these, is it time to move on and teach other material? Or are these films too important to ignore, even with their hateful imagery and themes? The Birth of a Nation, originally titled The Klansman, received much criticism for its depiction of the Civil War and Black Americans as evil and dangerous. The director, D.W. Griffith, was also criticized because the film seemed sympathetic to the Confederacy and their practices of slavery and injustice, as they're portrayed as heroic and brave. The film also contained numerous amounts of blackface on white actors, which angered a lot of people of color. During the film's premiere in 1915, the NAACP organized protests and created a large movement to have the film censored, which was ultimately unsuccessful. Perhaps worst of all, the film was later used as a recruitment video for the KKK, further feeding into the narrative that Griffith sympathized with the radical group. So with all of this controversy and problematic elements of the film, why is it still taught in film school? Author and instructor Paul McEwen explains why he continues to teach The Birth of a Nation for his film courses in his article, Racist Film, Teaching the Birth of a Nation. He writes, "The payoffs for teaching the film are well worth its challenges, and not because it is some kind of classic that needs to be appreciated. The film is one of the most effective tools I have for teaching ideological analyses of film, for understanding audience reception, and for considering the ways in which film can tell history." He also argues that it should be taught in more than just film courses, as it relates to numerous social issues that the world faces. McEwen acknowledges that it is essential for him to prepare his classes for what they're about to see by giving them warnings about graphic and racist content in the film. Later in his article, he tells a story about a time when a black student questioned him for showing a Klan recruiting film. He explained that the film is too important to the discussion of American racism and history of cinema to be ignored in the course. McEwen is not teaching this film through a narrative lens, which would be problematic, but instead embraces the controversy of the film and teaches to that aspect. Learning about this is absolutely crucial, since it teaches people about how deep racism has been in America and helps students track the evolution of black portrayal in cinema. McEwen's method to teaching The Birth of a Nation is important because he does not try to ignore the blatant racism in the film, but in fact uses it to his advantage in an ethical way. Even with people like Paul McEwen doing their best to condemn the content in The Birth of a Nation, America has a very not-so-strange obsession with this film. The Library of Congress even selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry, citing it being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Even though they gave similar reasoning to that of McEwen, the fact that this film is recognized on a national level and that it was a commercial success when it was released speaks to America's acceptance of racist media. An even more explicit example of racist cinema is Triumph of the Will. The film is a documentary full of Nazi Party leader Adolf Hitler and other Nazi officers at a rally in Nuremberg in 1934. Although some of the footage was manipulated, it is not a fictional depiction of history like The Birth of a Nation is. Again, it is the content that has many people upset. The film showcases the exact attitude and language used by the Nazis in World War II. However, the reason why it's continuously taught in film school is because of the specific techniques and methods used in the documentary. After descending from the heavens in a plane, Adolf Hitler speaks to a crowd filled with star-struck German citizens. Many critics see this as the director, Leni Riefenstahl's, way to frame Hitler as a godlike being, especially with the many low-angle shots. This can be extremely frustrating, offensive, and depressing to watch, and even with Germany banning any symbols of Nazism, the film still remains relevant in the country and in film schools across the world. Germany decided that the film itself would not be banned as a whole, but instead would be labeled as Nazi propaganda and could only be used in an educational way. However, just as The Birth of a Nation was used to recruit members for the KKK, Triumph of the Will was specifically made for that reason, to recruit new members to the Nazi Party and military efforts of the German people. This film was used to not only justify their methods, but also influence non-believers that the Nazi Party was working in their best interest. Film schools find it to be critical viewing material as it teaches important techniques for documentary filmmaking such as framing, editing, and the influence of non-fictional work. Again, even though the content is unforgivable, Riefenstahl's masterful work can most definitely be an important teaching tool as she creates the ultimate example of propaganda that works. Now it's time to tell us how you feel about this topic. Should these movies still be taught in film school, or is it finally time to move on and teach less problematic material? Let us know in the comment section. If you like this video, please feel free to leave a like. If not, a dislike, no problem. And remember, you can catch our main show, Nobody's Listening to This Movie podcast, every Friday on all podcast platforms, so don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and take care.